Navigating the Digital Jungle with Sue Atkins and friends.
Welcome to Navigating the Digital Jungle with me, Sue Atkins, parenting author and broadcaster, and I'm delighted to be here today with my friends Tara Jones, an experienced deputy head and EdTech consultant, working with families and schools around tools and interventions for healthier, more purposeful phone use. And Angeline Corvalia, creator of Data Girls and Friends, empowering young minds with online safety and AI literacy videos, games and educational materials. So we're here to guide you through the digital jungle. So thanks for joining us today. And our topic this week is cyberbullying. So we're going to be tackling a critical and concerning issue. As I say, it's cyberbullying. How can we protect our children from online harassment? And what steps can we take to create a safer digital environment for everyone? So we're going to be looking at cyberbullying awareness and prevention. We're going to look at identifying the signs of cyberbullying in children and in teens. We're going to be looking at strategies for parents and educators to prevent cyberbullying. And we're going to be then giving you some resources and tools for reporting and dealing with cyberbullying incidences. In the news this week, I thought I'd mention the US Surgeon General calls for cigarette-style warnings on social media platforms. Dr. Vitek Murtha asked for required labels that state that social media is associated with significant mental health harms. And he suggested that it has a warning label to include on social media platforms that it is a dangerous platform that contributes to mental health and crisis in US youth. Did you see that, Tara? What did you make of it?
I did, and I saw the news around it, sort of everybody getting in and talking about it, and it kind of felt like an of course for me. We've talked often about screen time as a metric being nuanced, but social media and excessive use of social media, the research is in. We know that can really harm and be detrimental to mental health. Some of the statistics, as soon as our children are spending in excess of 3 hours, we're starting to see that direct correlation with poor and decreasing mental health. So when it comes to social media, absolutely, I think that is the one area we've got to have clarity and guidance and support. And we've talked about that before, haven't we? Unpicking screen time and taking out what's the really harmful stuff that's happening when we're seeing it used in excess.
And I know, Angeline, you've been doing a bit of research and reading around this stuff. What did you make of that this week?
It surprised me a little bit. I mean, as an American, I know the importance of what the Surgeon General says. At least it was when I used to live in America. So really interesting for him to come out, and say that. I think it will be interesting to see how it pans out, because I consider social media the big societal test of what happens if you put AI out in the masses uncontrolled. And I think it wasn't a good result of the test, exactly as Tara was pointing out. So it will be really interesting to see if this really brings about some change to some safer social media, safer algorithms, or the way algorithms are programmed, and maybe really finally some laws and some changes so that the warnings aren't so extreme. I don't know. It will be really interesting to see how that pans out in time.
Yeah, I thought his analogy was quite interesting. I always talk about giving the keys to a 4x4 car and just saying, off you go, but they haven't passed their test. And he actually said he thought that social media is the equivalent of having children in cars that have no safety features and driving on roads with no speed limits. He said no traffic lights and no rules whatsoever. And then we're telling them, you know what, do your best, figure it out how to manage it. And he thought that was rather insane. So yeah, at least lots of people are talking about it, writing about it and thinking about it.
It's that, isn't it, Sue? You're spot on. We talk about the pendulum sort of swinging, and then it hopefully will arrive at a sensible, safer place for our young people. But it seemed as shocking, and lots of people were reacting to it being a shocking announcement. Like, can you believe somebody is saying this? but if it is backed by some research. And so we're starting to see, and it's about our young people, isn't it? It's the adolescent brain that struggles to make those controls for themselves. Their behaviour is not yet ready. We talk about the adolescent brain waiting till sort of age 25, not yet ready to be able to self-regulate social media use. Can't do it.
Absolutely. So let's crack on with cyberbullying, because that's an issue that has become, of course, increasingly prevalent to kids as they spend more time online. And it can have really devastating effects on young people's mental health and well-being. And it's a subject close to my heart, as I was bullied at school at 11 when I first started my secondary school, and I developed alopecia, which is where your hair falls out, because I didn't tell anyone about it at first. I felt there was something wrong with me. But of course, nowadays, that would be much, much worse, because it would be 24/7 and you'd never get away from it. And as we know, cyberbullying can take many forms, and it really can affect many children in many different ways. I mean, I was reading an article on the BBC website about cyberbullying that said nearly 1 in 6 adolescents have experienced cyberbullying. And then I went on to see that even more school-aged children have reported being cyberbullied, even despite the pandemic, according to the World Health Organization. They did this massive study of 279,000 young people from 44 different countries and regions. So it's a big piece of research. You can find more about it if you want to read about it in the show notes. But the report said there is an urgent need to educate young people, families and schools of the forms of cyberbullying and its implications. But before we dive into chatting about it together, I want to say this before I forget. I want to tell you about a fantastic app created by the amazing Trisha Prabhu. She's a 23-year-old innovator, social entrepreneur, global advocate, and inventor of Rethink, which is a patented technology and a really effective way to detect and to stop online hate. So, I mean, I like to think of Rethink as it's kind of a student-led movement, because to be created by such a young person, but it stops cyberbullying one message at a time. It reminds me a bit of my pause to ponder moments that I do when I'm working with clients and parents, because I talk about responding rather than reacting with my pause button technique. You can read all about that on the show notes as well. But you know what it's like? In the heat of the moment, teens and tweens often post offensive content. So this Rethink technology, I think, is amazing, and something that we'll put in the show notes if you want to go and explore it, because we've got to prevent online hate. We've got to stop divisiveness and unkindness that is leading sometimes to, children self-harming or even suicide. So let's look then at explaining what cyberbullying is and how it differs from traditional bullying. Tara, do you want to go first? How would you describe cyberbullying?
Yeah, thank you, Sue. Cyberbullying really is the use of digital platforms. So we've been talking about social media, texting, having online games, and it's sort of that the harassing, threatening, quite often to embarrass someone. And unlike traditional bullying, typically that might occur face to face. Cyberbullying can happen at any time and anywhere. So there's that risk of it being pervasive and harder to escape. You're not able to come home from it. And it can include actions like spreading rumours online, posting hurtful comments, sending threatening messages, or even, and we've seen a rise of this, sort of creating fake profiles. So in that way, we have the bullies being able to hide behind a fake profile in order to humiliate someone. And Sue, you've mentioned there such a fantastic tool, Rethink. I'm in the Northwest, and I saw that there was some really great joined up thinking from Cheshire Police. So Cheshire Police have been out educating using the Rethink tool and platform. And so I think they've reached about 40,000 students. So it's the stopping and the thinking before we reach that point where the message is. But the statistics show cyberbullying is happening, and it's happening for our young people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Angeline, what signs do you think, some of the signs that parents perhaps listening to this today should look out for that might indicate that their child is being cyberbullied?
Well, I think first of all, it's important to keep in mind that the child most likely won't tell you about what's happening. I found some numbers from the U.S. National Crime Prevention Council where they found that only 11% of teens told their parents about cyberbullying. So it's just an incredibly small number. And the signs can be, obviously, every person is different. So it can be emotional, psychological, behavioral, or even physical. So it can be more frequent headaches or stomach aches, a poor appetite, sleep problems, or generally sudden changes in mood, self-esteem, different, stronger emotional reactions, or the ability to concentrate, different use of devices, more nervous or maybe avoiding the devices, different willingness to socialize or anxiety, depression, change in academic performance. So it's really important to keep in mind that everyone is different and most likely they're not going to tell you about it, unfortunately.
Yeah, but that's where, Tara, we were chatting and we talked, girls, don't we, about communication and connection and keeping the lines of communication open so that they can come to you if they feel a bit threatened or they feel unsure about something. Because sometimes, though, we don't know really what to do we? You were saying, Angeline, about parents not really understanding how to handle it. Did you find some research about that?
Yeah, I did. I was looking at the homepage of the Cyberbullying Research Center, and they have a really nice document, which I'll put a link to in the show notes. I'm just explaining cyberbullying, and one of the aspects is why it's so difficult to prevent cyberbullying. And there were two main issues that they identified. The first is that regardless of the fact that this has been around for a good 20 years now, cyberbullying, bullying forever, is that many people actually don't appreciate the harm that's associated with it. You don't appreciate the fact that it can actually balloon and go viral. Bullying didn't go viral when there were no mobile phones. And so more people can find out about it. It can last longer. More people can participate in it. So this is the first, this awareness. And the second is just the lack of awareness of the parents of the technology and what to do about it, the know-how. And also the responsibility for who is responsible for ensuring appropriate use of technology. This is another aspect that this Cyberbullying Research Center identified as a problem because we can't quite decide as a society who is responsible for that.
That one's really complicated in schools. I know I've spoken to some senior leaders and they say, well, we can say to the parents, your child shouldn't really, at this age, they shouldn't be accessing it because the guidance is 13 for social media. And yet you might have most of your year 7 and year 8 students are on the social media. So can schools kind of say, well, they shouldn't be on it. It's not recommended. That's where it's happening and it's there and it's out there. So who is going to step in and support and offer the right guidance? So it is a difficult one to consider who takes responsibility.
No, also the police can't really step in unless there's a crime. I mean, that was really nice what you described, Tara, that where this obviously the police were stepping in, awareness campaigns and this kind of thing. But yeah, the school also can't do anything outside of the school time. Yeah. Parents don't know how to handle it. Schools don't know when they should step in, and also the authorities, they can't just step in all the time because they would be probably accused of being Big Brother or something. It's quite difficult.
As a parent, if you have a child at home in the evenings who's displaying any of those symptoms and they're withdrawn and you know that something is going on, Sue, you mentioned being 11 years old and the physical impact it had on you. For that to be happening in your home and to be struggling for the right places to go for support, incredibly difficult.
You feel violated, certainly now. When I've done some phone-ins for ITV on this morning's sofa, people ring in and ask me what to do. And the poor kids, they feel totally 24/7 overwhelmed by it. And parents don't always know. So what do you say, Tara, then? If parents suspect their child is being cyberbullied, what sort of steps do you think they could take?
Well, the first thing is, of course, as we always talk about on this podcast, to have and model that open and supportive conversation. So we talk about introducing that quite young, don't we? Long before we hand over the smartphone, we start the conversations around technology. We have those conversations about concerns, the type of things that could happen. 11%, did you say, Angeline? 11% would be willing to share. So that's a worrying statistic. I also read sort of 9 out of 10 children, I think, in the UK are not going to let anyone know what's happening. So we've got to kind of try to be ahead of it. You mentioned a change in behaviour and sort of potentially being secretive. That comes back to what is almost my top tip, not to let phones into the bedrooms, because it's quite often in isolated times when we can see the problems growing. But that aside, let your children know that you're there to help, that they can talk to you about anything, and if we do get to a situation where we're seeing, document any evidence. You can take screenshots, messages, posts. You should still report behaviour to the relevant platform or service. If it's at school, most likely there will be policies in place, and consider, involving them in conversations. When we see our children really struggling, I do always advise to seek professional help, particularly if they're struggling emotionally. Obviously, what we want to be able to do is that preventative work to catch it early and to have those open and honest conversations. But where we're further on and the problem's there, we're going to need to go to outside and seek support and professional service,
And one of the things that I noticed that I was scared about, actually, many moons ago, of course, is, oh God, don't go into the school, Dad. Don't go and tell anyone. And as a teacher and former deputy head myself, I remember handling these situations, and we do it now. We're so sophisticated. Well, most schools are very sophisticated at handling that. You're not going to throw fire onto it like a frying pan that's going to go up. You do try and have techniques and strategies to help. But the more people that know about it, the more that you can get it out into the open and deal with it. But one of the key things not to do, I remember when I was at a Christmas concert coming out of the church, it was that we'd had the choir practice or whatever we had with all the kids. And these two dads started having a go because the girls had fallen out and they started to be unkind to each other, and the two dads kind of piled in. And I thought, that's not the right way to handle it either. So we've got to look at prevention, but we've also got to look at all of us coming together to try and support children, preventing it, educating them, talking to the schools. It's a communal kind of problem, isn't it, Angeline? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it is. And one of the things I was thinking of as you were talking, Tara, another recommendation that I read that was like red lights recommended. If you see a problem, recognize a problem, to mutually agree the course of action, because the child already feels violated and vulnerable, and the very least, even with, of course, with the best intentions, that they have to feel that you're 100% unconditionally on their side, and they will be extra sensitive. So really make sure that it's mutually agreed, and have your parents fighting in front of the Christmas concert, for example.
We had a child counsellor at one of the schools I worked with, and years ago, so it's not necessarily specific to cyberbullying, but for any parents or partners or, I've taken this with me in life. When somebody shares with you, you can say to them, okay, I can do 3 things. Do you want me to just listen? Do you want me to listen and give you some advice? Do you want me to listen and do something about this? And that has stuck with me. And it happened with my son recently. So this wasn't cyberbullying, but it's an example of a situation that was happening at school. And to start with, he just wanted me to listen. And then we came back to it. And eventually he said, I'm ready for action. I'm ready. But if at point 1, I jumped straight in, I could have potentially broken down that line of communication. And that trust. And I think that's so appropriate. Let's come up with the solution together. And also share the sort of start statistics on how many children this is happening to. Because our children might feel like they're the only person it's happening to, but the data's telling us differently. Actually, we're talking about a majority of children are going to experience some form of cyberbullying. So how best can we share stories, examples, and hopefully try to move that data and those statistics down?
So Angeline, how does AI feed into this good and bad? Because it doesn't necessarily all mean bad. There's some good ways that it can feed in to help this situation, can't it?
Yeah, it can. I mean, AI can be used effectively to fight cyberbullying, because AI can obviously analyze masses of data extremely quickly, much quicker than humans. So it can recognize the patterns of cyberbullying faster, and it can recommend actions such as automatically flagging the incident. It can filter out hateful or offensive content, or it can intervene with recommendations for all parties. So for the victims, the perpetrators, or the bystanders, for how to manage the situation. So really, if it's utilized effectively, positively, it can help cyberbullying. Honestly, I don't always understand why the social media platforms don't implement that a little bit more. There's always some kind of discussion about personal freedom.
It's complicated, the social media platforms, because it was actually Trish, who you mentioned earlier from Rethink. Her TED Talk is fantastic. And she was talking about the fact that actually it's the responsibility of the victim usually to stop and report the messaging. You know, the action is stop and block, report. But then that again is falling to the victim. Why not intervene with the perpetrator? You know, and that's where you're talking about technological advances could say, wait, this comment's hurtful. Why are you posting it?
I know, Angeline, you do Data Girl Digital Defenders, don't you? Do you want to tell us briefly about that? We'll put the Digital Defenders in the show notes. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the Digital Defenders is just a kind of character that I've added to the Data Girl world that kind of helps people and kids understand that everyone can be a digital defender, a data defender, and just to give these little skill sets one by one, as you said, in tiny snippets of information, how they can be digital defenders and slowly make the internet a safer place. Just to go back to your question about AI and the bad side, there's one thing I for sure want to mention. So aside from what may be more known is this automated harassment, I mean, bots can be programmed to harass more. And even with the information that it has, the same information that's used to personalize feeds and make personal recommendations can also be used to personalize hateful, harmful attacks because they can recognize vulnerabilities. And it also very realistic deepfakes, which are basically just fake voices, images, or even videos. There's even been many disturbing reports in some countries of youth in schools creating fake nude images of their classmates and using them for bullying. I mean, it's absolutely insane. So our children need to be digital defenders. We just won't be able to solve them from every situation. We won't even be able to think of every situation. So that's the whole concept.
But actually, it's important then that we as parents get savvy, get knowledge. And that's why we're doing this really on the podcast. Because if they're suffering all that stuff and we don't even understand it, we owe it to our kids not to get overwhelmed, not to put our head in the sand, but get some information so you can positively help them or protect them. So, yeah, I do advocate they go and look at some of your wonderful videos and things because they're so bite-sized but so helpful. And I've written an awful lot about bullying. Funny that, seeing as I was bullied when I was 11. So I've written articles about what bullying is and how it can differ between boys and girls. And I also work with the charity Ditch the Label. I did a lot of work with them around talking about all sorts of articles around what to do, how to handle it, what to say when you go into the schools. And we did some phone-ins on ITV this morning around that with Ditch the Label. So check out the show notes for all of that sort of information too. But I just want to flag up some handful of things to remember. Seek support as a parent with this, not just your mates and a bottle of wine. There's loads to help you to access Ditch the Label's Parents Hub, because surrounding yourself with like-minded people that understand and can give you good information, I think is very important. So go and look at ditchthelabel.org. Seek professional help, as Tara says. You can't do this all on your own. You shouldn't be expected to either. There are people around you and your community and your school and your kids to help. There's no shame in seeking professional help. We're a bit shy about that, I think, still in the UK. So go and find people that can support and help you. And remember, importantly, you are not alone, A, as a parent, or B, your kids are not. Because look at all those stats that are showing you globally, this is a huge, big problem. And I think understanding is important. So you try your best to understand and empathize with your child. You may not understand it sometimes, but don't brush it aside and go, oh, you're all right, don't be silly. Or, as my mother said to me, God bless her, she's long since passed, you're a bit too sensitive. And I wasn't being sensitive, I was being bullied. So anyway, don't do that with your kids. Listen to them, sit down with them, support them. Try not to look panicked, because that doesn't reassure. So I think, you don't ignore it, but you don't, on the other hand, rush all guns blazing. You pause to ponder, you think about it. Your advice, Tara, is fantastic about what to do there. And also don't be too hard on yourself as a parent, because why would you be expected to know how to deal with this straight away? It's normal to feel as though you're fumbling around in the dark trying to help, until you start to see results and you start to understand that you're not helpless. There are things out there you can do and other people to help you, and to remember that you can come through the other side. I worked with a family and there was a 14-year-old girl and she had been a bit bullied. Her name was Emma and she started secondary school and she was excited, but she soon sort of got involved in some cyberbullying from some very unkind classmates. They sent out some fake profiles and stuff, and that left her really devastated and very vulnerable. But her mum, Sarah and Tom, they came together, they worked with me, and we noticed a slow change as we worked around it, talking to the school, supporting her. She got community around the school as well to raise this whole topic of cyberbullying collectively. And she got some professional help, some therapy and some support, and she did come out the other side. So I want you all to know that you can come through these difficult times as well. But we're going to put up on the website as well, the COP, we're going to put Childline, Kidscape, all these very, very helpful websites that you can go to get some of the support that you might need. And now a quick word from World Digital Detox Day. Today's episode of Navigating the Digital Jungle is brought to you in collaboration with World Digital Detox Day, an international movement dedicated to reclaiming our lives from the overwhelming grip of technology. So, are you feeling overwhelmed by screens and technology? Take a break and join millions of people around the world on World Digital Detox Day, because it's the perfect opportunity to unplug, unwind, and reconnect with the world around you for your mental health and your family and children's well-being. Join this important movement with over 7.5 million people worldwide and visit worlddigitaldetoxday.com to learn more about becoming involved with the world's largest digital well-being initiative. Start your digital detox journey today to better mental health and well-being for your whole family. Angeline, it's time for our family change segment, which I really like because it's not a challenge. It's a small change that Tara suggested, I think. Simple thing that people can try this week around prevention of your child being cyberbullied. So grab your digital machetes and let's tackle this one together. What do you think, Angeline? What's your advice?
Well, I think one thing that we can do to help prevent cyberbullying is to really educate our children. We've talked about this, but specifically about empathy and respectful online behavior, and also resilience. So obviously empathy and respectful online behavior for the bullies and the bystanders, but for the victims, resilience can really go a long way. So discuss real life scenarios is always a good way to start. Both real life examples from what you know, what you've read online, and hypothetical situations to talk about with others. This is another thing, actually, AI could be used for in a creative way. You can also go to an AI chatbot like Gemini or ChatGPT and just ask it for some kind of scenarios to talk through, and it can create kind of personalized scenarios. So that's one thing I've heard a lot of parents using in something like that.
I think I'm going to go back to that where we're using tech, and in order to try and prevent some of the harms, try to keep tech out of isolated places such as bedrooms. Keep coming back to that tip, but I'm not going to let it go.
That's a great message, isn't it? Because so many kids go, oh, I'm private. And when they get into teenage years, they like to be independent. They kind of keep away from the family a bit. But actually, it's the worst thing that they can do if they're in a difficult position. So you're right to keep banging on about it. Hopefully, parents will start to think about that. So with time for our listeners' questions.
Listener questions.
Tara, what do you reckon?
Don't we just love hearing from our listeners, Sue? And we're starting to get comments and feedback. It's great. So we've got some fantastic questions here, and let's go with this one. So it's about strategies. What are some effective strategies that individuals, kids, parents can use to respond to and report cyberbullying if they witness it or experience it? That's interesting, isn't it? Asking if they're witnessing it.
I mean, what's the potential, do you think? I mean, blocking and reporting, is that a good thing to first of all start with, and seeking support and documenting the evidence, I guess? What do you think? I'm big on the bystander thing as well.
I was just going to bring that up. That's brought up regularly in schools and kind of in workshops and conversations. And, you know, when we have had police in doing workshops, they talk about, as a bystander, witnessing it.
Yeah.
What's your role in that? And how does that, you know, impact you? And that's a huge one for our young people to navigate. They're going to think quickly, they're going to be worried about friendship groups, how they look, popularity.
Yes.
But if we can work with young people to say, if you've witnessed something, and you can talk about your gut reaction, and it feels uncomfortable, that comment feels uncomfortable, again, it's that pause, isn't it? Because you might just think, well, I didn't write it, I just liked it. Or I didn't say it.
But it's difficult, isn't it? Because, as you say, they don't want to be kind of ostracised themselves. But I remember reading Alistair Campbell's book, actually. He talked about being a bystander and about you can't really do that because then you're facilitating or allowing bad behaviour to be not called out. And it's the same thing when you see different things happen on tubes with women and stuff like that. So I'm quite big on the bystander thing. But you've got to talk and teach your kids how to be safe at the same time if they're going to step up a little bit and do something about it. You don't want them rushing in and getting into trouble and danger either, do you? I mean, what's your thoughts about that, ladies?
Well, I really appreciate the difficulty of being a bystander. Personally, my approach towards my daughter and this kind of thing, I kind of talk through it constantly, not all the time, but any situation where I see someone could step in, I do try to talk her through that. So it maybe, hopefully, will be ingrained. Well, she'll know how to step up, because I personally wouldn't have been able to do it when I was younger. It would have been very difficult for me. So I think the more we can just make it a natural thing for our children.
Model it is the thing, isn't it? I whatever way I talk about things, my kids were listening to me because they were watching me, observing me, listening to me. So we model kindness, empathy, respect for elderly, for young, for different groups, for cultures, races. And over time, those values, they're actually core values, aren't they, of a family or of your own values of integrity and stuff, that you do then guide them to do something about it. So I think that's quite good. It gives people a taste of how to handle it, what to say, what to do. But we'd love to hear from you. So do send in some messages to info@navigatingthedigitalJungle.com. Tell us what you think. Tell us some of your experiences. Tell us some of the hopeful things and perhaps some of the things that worked for you and for your family, because we'd really love to hear about that.
Now for some top tips.
What advice have you got, Angeline, for us this week, for our listeners? How to create a safer online environment for our kids?
Well, my quick tip is be an active champion of something you feel strongly about. So if you feel strongly about bullying, cyberbullying, get educated, just be the champion. It will go a very long way.
Thank you. And how about yourself, Tara? What's your advice?
My advice is going to be for parents to really understand settings on any apps, particularly social media. We've talked about this responsibility to sort of upskill and up-level. Instagram is one example. Lots of young people set their accounts to private. That's good practice, but they don't realise within Instagram, your location, your name and your age and your school name, if they are in your bio, they're public. So you've got to make sure that you dig into that. So it's there, it's in the help centre. So it's an important change that we can make. Just make sure that you've got your account set to private, but also any information in your bio, because that little bit of first information, you can replace it with emojis. So parents, top tip, just make sure you understand the settings on any social media accounts.
Gosh, they're both very helpful tips. My final piece of advice is to stay engaged and informed about your child's online world. Regularly check in with them to see how they are around their digital experiences, when you're chatting with them, driving them somewhere or eating with them, and make sure that they know they can come to you as a parent with their worries, with their concerns. And of course, talk and teach them, as we've said all the way through this, about empathy and kindness. We wouldn't speak sometimes like that to people in the real world. Why do we think that we can do it online? And I know politicians aren't very good at it. And I know all sorts of people like Andrew Tate are, putting out awful information. So we have to be the defenders of that. And we have to talk and teach our children about kindness and respect and tolerance and safer, more supportive online environments for all kids.
If I could just really add at that moment, that's really something I'm just inspired to say, that we really have to think about how different it is online than it was. I was just thinking about something else, which will for a different episode. And I was like, wow, that's so natural now, but that just wasn't a thing at all. And if you just think it from this perspective, it really helps you get a perspective of how difficult this is for kids. As you said, it doesn't go away ever. There's no safe space unless you put your phone away. It goes viral. Everyone knows about it. It can stay there forever as a video, and the aggressor can hide. All of these things didn't exist even when I was a kid. So the more we really dive in and understand the differences that we luckily can't even imagine, the better we'll be at helping them.
Yeah, you're right. So, ladies, what are you up to this week? Tara, what have you been working on at the moment?
Oh, I just did the most fantastic event with a bunch of young people and parents and teachers. And we all got together and we explored a lot of the themes that we've been talking about. So there'll be a blog coming soon. That's from FOMO.tech. And it's great to get out there and speak to parents and hear how grateful they are for the help. We've got new listeners from that event and parents just saying, to your point, we didn't have this. So how can we best support our young people? We didn't live from age 10 with phones in our pockets and with this online presence constantly being there. So we did a lot of work in that space. And to that point, it was really important to have peer-to-peer conversations. So we focused on transition, and it was year 6 going to year 7s. They heard from me a little bit, but I got a group of year 7s to come down from high school, and then the year 7s talked to the year 6. I overheard them even talking about phone policies and explaining. And I was like, this is what needs to happen, peer-to-peer, young people sharing their experiences. And to that point, Sue, I know earlier we talked about helpful organisations. And whilst it's not my work, I would like to share websites like stopbullying.gov, cyberbullying.org, Common Sense Media, Anti-Bullying Alliance. We can get out there and get reading. We've got some great content available to us.
Yeah, and we'll put those websites into the show notes too, so you can go and get that help if you need it. And Angeline, what are you working on this week? Whiskers?
Yeah, Whiskers is a cat that has joined the Data Girl world because my daughter wanted to have a cat character. So that's what Sue is talking about. But yeah, I'm also working with parents actually. I have a workshop series called the Parents Guide to AI. So basically what parents need to know, non-tech parents who don't want to be tech parents just need to know about AI to help understand what it's like for their kids to live in the AI world. And it's so fulfilling. It's just amazing when you teach them the basics and you break down, especially these super mega hyped videos by companies like OpenAI, and you just break it down to what the AI really can do, what it can't do, who makes the decisions. AI is not just a magical machine. There's people behind it. So that kind of stuff, it's absolutely fascinating and fulfilling to be able to empower parents with that. And obviously we're going to roll it out to kids as well.
So we'll put that all in the show notes, or go to the website and find all about the team and check out our blogs, because we've started to put up our blogs now. They're available too. I'm working on Power Hours. I've been invited to Scotland, to St Andrews, to talk at the Global Wellness summit, which I'm very excited about because my husband thinks that's fantastic. He said, can I come with you? Because he's a golf fan. I said, I'm not too sure about that. Anyway, that's what I'm working on, power hours with corporations, talking around all these topics that match the podcast.
Navigating the Digital Jungle with Sue Atkins and friends.
Listen, thank you everybody for tuning in and navigating the digital jungle with me and my friends Tara and Angeline. I hope you've enjoyed our regular episodes so far, and go and check out my exclusive bonus content and subscribe. And, go and check out, I've written something special called Preventing Your Child from Becoming a Cyberbully, because that's the other aspect that we sometimes leave out and forget. And then I also wrote Empowering Your Child to Stand Up Against Bullying, a guide for parents. So you can find that over on the show notes, but over on the website, which is navigatingthedigitalJungle.com. So don't miss out on all of that. So we've come to the end of our episode for today, but before we go, I'd just like to give a shout out and a thank you to Mrs. Elborn, a teacher from Australia who teaches here in the UK, who posted on Instagram, I'm not a parent, but helping our kids navigate the digital world is something that keeps me up at night. This was such an insightful podcast and is well worth a listen and share. And I'm also one for a good pun on words, so I think it's aptly named. So I was thrilled to see that. Well done, and thank you so much, Mrs. Elborn. Keep sharing, keep telling everybody. So until next time, stay safe, have fun, and keep exploring and telling all your friends and family to join us here on Navigating the Digital Jungle.
Yeah, jungle out there.